she carried on with the job. But one of the things that she kind of learned about while she was there was the impact on family members. It was how terrifying and scary a cancer diagnosis can be. So everything that she was talking about with all the people she met was sort of extremely relevant to her situation and to the King's situation.
And the Queen is on a lot of front pages this morning. She's spoken about how she longed to speak about her husband, the King's cancer, before it was revealed. The King's diagnosis was announced in February 2024, just a week before Camilla opened a Maggie's Cancer Support Centre in London. Camilla has now given an interview to Maggie's chief executive, Dame Laura Lee, and spoken about how she felt at the time.
Coming to see our Maggie's just after the King being diagnosed. Nobody could say anything at the time. That was quite difficult. I almost said something, but I felt that it wasn't the time to say. Looked at everybody who was suffering and all the relations, and I think it made me realise even more how important these places were.
There we go. Let's talk to Chief Royal Correspondent at Newsweek, Jack Royston. Jack, morning to you.
Good morning.
So this is we're in the middle of August and people love royal stories. I can't tell you, every time we look at the most read stories on the Times, it's always a royal story. People care deeply about Camilla's views on the King. But what have we learned?
Yeah, people care about royal stories partly because they're very human stories, and this is a perfect example of that. Now, I happen to already know that Camilla had this very difficult experience because of a cover story I did on her for Newsweek about a year or so ago. This was the end of January in 2024. So Charles had known for a little while that he had cancer, but we all knew that he'd gone in for a prostate procedure. We didn't know that cancer had been found. So she went to this Maggie's clinic because it had been in the diary. It wasn't related to the fact that Charles had been unwell. The show goes on. So she went on the visit, and she was actually asked while she was there, how's the boss doing? Because people did know he'd had this prostate procedure, and so she had to kind of say, oh yes, he's doing brilliantly. He's recovering well, because obviously that's what you say. And so she just absolutely, never complained, never explained, kicked in, I suppose. Yeah. And she carried on with the job. But one of the things that she kind of learned about while she was there was the impact on family members. It was how terrifying and scary a cancer diagnosis can be. So everything that she was talking about with all the people she met was sort of extremely relevant to her situation and to the King's situation.
Which is, we've all been, again, your point about we're all human beings. We've all been in difficult situations where something's happened in our life that we can't talk about, we don't want to talk about, and then you often find the bruises punched by someone unintentionally, and how you navigate that is a very common human experience. Can I ask you a sensitive question, Jack? The royals often, in this context, they're often praised for being candid. Talking about cancer helps other sufferers, but the King has chosen not to disclose what type of cancer he has. So he's not being open and helpful, actually. He could be open and helpful about the type of cancer which would help other sufferers inordinately, and he's chosen not to do that.
Yeah, I think you can argue this both ways. The other way to argue it is that if you reveal the particular type of cancer, then that might make people feel that his experience is only relevant to that one type. And so, let's say somebody has another different type of cancer, they may take fewer lessons from his experience, is the counter argument to what you're saying. I think probably the actual reason is just a little bit of old-fashioned privacy, that there isn't a certain amount that he's willing to talk about, but there's a line from his point of view, and he'd rather not get into the kind of gory details of it.
What do you think of Charles's? When Charles took over, there was a certain line of thinking that the late Queen was incredibly popular, incredibly successful, and he'd have difficult shoes to fill. Actually, her reputation has suffered because of Andrew, it strikes me, rather much in the last couple of years. But in any event, it seems that Charles is recognised to have done a good job. Now, I can't quite pinpoint why he has done that, or if indeed it is a job at all being king. But there's something in that there seems to have done better than expected.
Oh, for sure. No, he has. It's gone so much better than expected. I think in a weird way, while Donald Trump's presidency has probably been bad for a great many people around the world, and he's certainly ferociously unpopular in Europe, in a sense, he's been the making of the King's reign, because all of a sudden there's been this diplomatic context where only one man on planet Earth, or perhaps two, Charles and William, can fill this kind of hole in Britain's diplomatic relations, in Britain's international relations, which is, Donald Trump loves the royal family and he loves the king, and that has given Charles an opportunity to play one of those kind of once-in-a-generation roles, like Queen Elizabeth II in Northern Ireland. Charles was able to step in and back for Britain and do such an incredible job of it in a way that actually perhaps only he could when he went to Washington, D.C. In April, and actually not to kind of cozy up to Trump or suck up to Trump, and also not to get into a massive argument with Trump, but to softly and persistently tell some hard truths to the whole of American politics in a joint session of Congress, and get away with it as well.
The other argument about Charles was he would never be forgiven for Diana. And there's going to be a book about Diana from Earl Spencer, a book that I couldn't have any less interest in reading. I mean, the notion of this actually sort of chills me. I find the cult of Diana in this country sort of borderline incomprehensible, so I don't want to read another book about it. But Earl Spencer on Diana will bring up Charles's bad behaviour towards her. That's a potential risk, isn't it? Because Diana is still... I mean, once doing a phone-in when I did phone-in radio, and I remember mentioning Diana, and people were vitriolically hating Charles and Camilla. Now, that's changed a lot, but the return of Diana to the public discourse is probably not good for him, is it?
Probably not, no. I mean, bear in mind, though, that The Crown did go over this all in
true.
A huge amount of detail, plus the documentaries that William and Harry did, and then they did a third documentary back in 2017 when it was the 20th anniversary. So we've got the 30th anniversary next year, which will definitely rake some of this stuff up again. But it has been very well explored over the last 10 years. And so it may well be actually that, the younger generation have already had that experience of being exposed to it for the first time. They're probably not going to be the market for Charles Spencer's book, if the truth be told. He'll probably be pitching it at a slightly older audience of people who do already know that story. I would say that we probably won't see a big impact on Charles's approval ratings on the back of that book, but it will be very interesting to see whether Charles puts new material into the public domain, and to what extent he goes into areas that were considered controversial. Because obviously Diana did these speech tapes with a man called Peter Settler, an actor who was helping her prepare for her big bombshell interview, and where she gave a kind of really sort of measured, nuanced account of all her experiences on television. In her preparatory speech tape, she just put the kitchen sink out there to Peter Settler, only to him. It was never meant to be published. And there were extraordinary revelations that were actually never intended for broadcast, but they were broadcast in 2017 on Channel 4. Channel 4 published these tapes. And even The Crown didn't go anywhere near some of that stuff. That was the really controversial bit. So will Charles start to unpack any of that? And, that includes such allegations as Diana saying that Prince Philip gave Charles permission to have an affair. And that Charles said he refused to be the only Prince of Wales in history never to have a mistress. So if Spencer gets into some of that stuff, or puts new allegations that we haven't heard before, then that could obviously significantly elevate the kind of impact of the book.
That's a very, very good point, Jack. We will see what happens. Really good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Jack Royston, their Chief Royal Correspondent at Newsweek.